These 3 mistakes are going to break you as a new gardener. They are going to cause you to give up faster than anything else, because these 3 mistakes are really going to decide how successful you are as a new gardener. And I see almost 100% of new gardeners, including myself once upon a time, make these really super common mistakes that have a huge impact on your ability to be successful. And while these are certainly really common mistakes, they can 100% be avoided. So you don't have to make the same mistakes that I made. I'm a garden coach, and I know what you're thinking. That sounds made up. Okay, well, it kind of is a made-up job, but I assure you it's very real and very necessary. So what I do is I basically help new gardeners avoid as many pitfalls as possible when they're starting out and learning how to grow their own food. So I try to break things down into manageable steps for them when everything feels overwhelming. I try to help them be able to predict what they need to do in each season to be successful. And I also give them an outlet so that they have somebody to share all of those triumphs and mistakes with, because trying to do this alone without like a mentor or a community can actually be really hard and really draining. So basically, I provide the service that I wish I had when I first started out in gardening, because I made a lot of mistakes. And while that's a big part of gardening and absolutely can't be erased from the process of learning how to grow your own food, there are a lot of pitfalls that you can avoid, which will save you a lot of time, money, energy, and frankly, your sanity and enthusiasm for gardening. So today we are going to talk about the top 3 big mistakes that I see new gardeners make, and these are 100% mistakes that I made as well as a new gardener. These are also mistakes that I've seen almost 100% of my new garden coaching clients make, and we actually usually spend most of the first year just trying to fix these mistakes. So let's do kind of a fast and furious breakdown of how you can avoid these mistakes if you are a new gardener, or if you've already made these mistakes, how you can work on correcting them. Mistake number 1 is not putting your garden in the right place. Now, obviously, this is a big deal. It's not only going to affect how successful you're able to grow things, but it's also going to be a major pain in the tuchus to have to move it later. Do you think I can get to that sunflower right over there? So when you're thinking about where to place your garden on your property, let's talk about the basics. Number 1 is sunlight. Most of your annual vegetables that you grow need direct sun. That means a minimum of 8 hours of unfiltered direct sun a day. So the most important thing that you can do is to put your garden in a place that gets good sunlight. Another major thing to consider is access. You want your garden to be in a highly accessible place. You want it to be easy to get out to, because you're going to be going out to a regular basis. And if you place it in an area far away, it's going to discourage you from A, just wanting to go out there, and B, wanting to be out there regularly. So it's not going to be as enjoyable of space if you're, trucking up a hill or walking half a mile across your property. So put it in an area that's really central and close to your home, close to where you want to be spending time. Speaking of access, you're also going to want to make sure that it's somewhere where you can get in deliveries of soil, you can get wheelbarrows in, and you have water access. Another thing that you're going to want to look at when you're thinking about where to place your garden is everything that's happening around it. So a lot of times we'll kind of look at a garden space as almost an isolated area. We're going to put it here, and we don't back up and look at everything else around it. So we want to start thinking in a bigger picture about all of the other things that are going to be affecting our garden indirectly. That's going to be, how much shade does it get? How much sun does it get? Does it get pollution runoff? Is there street noise that's going to make it unpleasant for you to be out there? Is there a lot of harsh wind? Looking at all these external forces that are going to be affecting your garden site can make a big difference in the long run. Now, in addition to those things, there's obviously a lot of other factors that you're going to want to consider. Like, you know, do you have greedy goat neighbors that are trying to reach through the fence and eat all of your vegetables? Luckily, they'll also eat the weeds. But those three things are really critical. So if you at least ask yourself those three questions, it'll definitely help you get started on the right track. Because there's nothing more disappointing than setting up your beautiful new garden, having all these aspirations for it, and then finding out it's too shady to really grow anything, it's too hard to get to access on a regular basis, or it's just in a location that's not ideal because it's right up against a road, or you know, there's really bad runoff coming down a hill right into it, spreading a lot of weed seeds and things like that. And it'll just increase your ability to be able to garden more, to want to be out there more, and to want to continue growing your own food. The next big mistake that I see gardeners make is overlooking their soil. So to put it in perspective, your soil is the foundation of your garden. So I try to tell my new garden clients to basically focus on growing healthy soil, and as a result, you're going to end up with an amazing garden. So you're not really growing the plants or feeding the plants, you're feeding and nourishing the soil instead. So healthy living soil should really be its own ecosystem. And in that ecosystem, we have millions of tiny little microorganisms. We have worms, we have protozoa, we have bacteria and fungi. It's happening down there. It's a party in your soil if you're doing it right. And your soil is also going to hold oxygen. It's going to break down nutrients that your plants can then uptake. Plants can't just uptake that on their own. They have to have something else break it down and make it available to them. So it's really, really important that we have all of these components in our soil. That's way too long. I need to go get my clippers. Oh, I found them there in my pocket the whole time. Anyways, your soil is also really important for holding moisture so that your plants have proper moisture available to them. They're not going to be drying out as much, and they're going to be able to better maintain a consistent moisture level. So if we start with healthy soil, it is going to make a huge difference. I just spent a whole year with a client trying to basically work mostly just on her soil quality, and the results have been stunning. So every soil is pretty unique, and so it's kind of hard to give blanket advice as far as soil, but there are some basic things that you can do to start improving your soil today. So if you have raised beds, buy high quality soil. Don't cheap out. Don't, just dig up some clay soil from the back pasture and throw it in. That's going to be full of weeds. It's not going to be nutrient dense. It's already going to have a lot of issues just starting out with poor quality soil. So do buy a high quality soil if you can. Now, if you are using a native soil, and that means if you're digging in the soil that's already there, already present on your property, and you're doing like in-ground garden beds, what you want to do is, first of all, learn something about your soil. It's very important to look around and see what native plants are growing in it. This is going to tell you a lot. So is it acidic? Is it alkaline? Is it sandy? Is it clay? So there are some soil tests that you can do. There are soil tests that you can send off. Usually most extension offices will offer soil testing, and basically you can take a sample of your soil and send it off, and they're going to send back a whole profile on your soil. So your soil type, the nutrient density in it, all of those kind of things. Now, there are also some at-home soil tests that you can do. I'll link below to a couple of blog posts on how to do a few of those, but basically you can at least be testing your soil structure and how well your drainage is. All of this is going to be really important for how you take care of your plants and how you need to amend your soil to make sure that it's feasible to garden in it. And then there's also little test kits that you can get to test whether your soil is acidic or alkaline. A lot of tests you can do from home, and that's a great place to start getting a better understanding of what your soil quality is so that you know better how to amend it. But as a blanket statement, usually you can amend most soil by adding organic matter, and it's going to be helpful. So organic matter is basically a decomposing matter. So it could be like leaf litter, your old leaves that that fall, vegetable scraps from your kitchen, animal manures, it can be wood pieces. So there's a lot of things that are going to break down in that process of all the microorganisms and the fungi and the worms and things like that working on it and breaking it down. They're all releasing nutrients at different stages during that decomposition process. And then eventually we end up with humus, which is basically the soil structure that we're really working on here. And it's just a really rich organic matter. If you've ever like gone to a forest and kind of dug back that leaf layer and down below, it's just dark black, amazing, fluffy, and it smells really fresh and good. That's kind of what we're trying to achieve in our own gardens. So in most cases, adding organic matter is going to help benefit your garden and make sure that there's nutrients available to really attract all of those beneficial microorganisms and the worms and the decomposing bugs and insects like that. They're going to start breaking it down and adding nutrients back into your soil. Now, there's a lot of science that goes into that, and if you want to go deep, there are a lot of great resources out there. Your extension office probably has some for you, but I would highly recommend the book Teeming with Microbes. It is a great one, a very deep dive into soil microbiology, and it's a great one if you really want to start learning about that. So we've talked about adding your organic matter, which is almost always going to be a positive thing for your soil in holding nutrients and moisture. And another thing that it does is it helps cover your soil. So have you noticed how when you get an area all cleared, you're like, it's looking great, and then within a week, it's like covered in weeds again? So I tell a lot of my clients, it's because you can either cover your soil or it's gonna do it for you. And basically, soil's natural tendency is to protect that topsoil layer because that layer is really vulnerable. It can get washed away or blown away. And honestly, like it's very fragile. So if you've ever like driven by a field when they're tilling it, it's just a dust storm. It's all that topsoil. It's just getting mixed up and blown around in the wind. And we end up losing a lot of topsoil. So we can help with that by adding a layer of worm castings or compost or mulch or using cover cropping techniques and using these on a regular basis. So this way, we're covering our soil and we're feeding it. We're going to be attracting all those microorganisms that are going to make it a living ecosystem, and we're going to have happier plants as a result. So these are just some really basic things that you can start doing that are going to make a huge difference in improving your soil structure and, in the long run, giving you healthier plants. Finally, the third biggest mistake for new gardeners is the timing of everything. And this can be really hard to get right when you're new to gardening. This is especially one of those things where you don't know it till you know it. But there are some things you can do to ensure your success, because there is nothing more frustrating than like starting your garden, getting it all up and going, getting your first tomatoes, and then right away the frost basically comes through and kills everything. So getting the timing right is going to help ensure that you can grow things in the right season so that things are thriving, it's less work on you, and you're going to get bigger harvests. So one of the best things that you can do is just learn how to grow with the seasons and in the correct season. So a lot of people think that all plants grow in summertime. And while most of our annual vegetables do grow in the summertime, not all of them really love that summertime heat. So there are what's called cool crops and hot crops, and learning the difference between these can make a huge difference in your success, because you'll be growing things during the right time of year. So if you've ever had lettuce grow where it's just starting to grow and then all of a sudden it bolts and you're like, I don't get it. Every summer when I grow lettuce, it just instantly bolts or goes to flower, gets really bitter and tastes terrible. Well, that's because lettuce is a cool crop. It prefers cool seasons. So fall and spring are ideal times to grow lettuce. But if you try to grow your tomatoes in fall and spring, it's not going to do well because they're a hot crop. So learn the difference between cool crops and hot crops and learn which season to grow them in. In addition to learning the difference between cool crops and hot crops is learning how to put your plants in the right environment. If you have plants that are cool crops and you're growing them in the summertime, they're probably going to need somewhere that's a little bit cooler, maybe a little bit more dappled shade, or it's near a water source so the soil stays a little bit damper, versus if you're growing tomatoes or peppers or or things that really like a hot, arid climate, you're not going to want to put them in a place that gets afternoon shade when they're missing out on that midday sun. So understanding your microclimates, and believe me, you have a lot of different microclimates on your property, you just need to get creative and start looking for them, can really maximize your gardening space. For instance, we have these large 200-gallon grow bags over here that we grow all of our hot crops in because it helps increase the soil temperature. They're in a full sun location, and it really does make a difference in our production. Versus over in the other garden, I have a lot more of our cool crops because those are in-ground beds. They're going to stay a little bit cooler, and it makes a big difference depending on which one I want to grow. And you can create a lot of microclimates, and it's going to definitely help your success. And best of all, it reduces a lot of your work because you're growing things not only during the right season, but in the right spots. Then there are two numbers that you should really get to know. And those two numbers are the days to harvest for the variety that you're growing and your frost date. And here's why you want to know them. So your frost date is in your area the day when you're going to expect either your last frost in the springtime or your first frost in the fall. And this makes a big difference because it tells you how long you have to grow your crops that aren't necessarily frost hardy. Now, some crops are, so again, we want to grow those during the seasons where they can handle some frost, they'll be okay. But for our hot crops like our cucumbers and our tomatoes and our eggplants and our peppers, all of these are not frost hardy. So we want to be able to make sure we're growing them and getting them in the soil at the right times, and so that we have a long enough season to let them mature and get a really good harvest from them. So in addition to that, you're also going to want to know how long it takes each variety to get to a harvestable point. So this is often known as the days to maturity or the days to harvest. And a lot of times you'll actually see this number on the back of your seed packets. So with this, every variety is different. So what this means is that you can maximize your harvest by growing the varieties that are going to work within your frost dates. For instance, we don't have a really long hot season here, but what I do is I start all of these plants ahead of time, and I know based on those numbers how far in advance I need to start them so that they're already super mature by the time they go out into the garden. So if you look at those two numbers, you can really maximize your season based on the varieties that you grow. So in your first couple years of gardening, really start to focus on learning which varieties grow in which season, what your season is and what it's like, how long you have, and finding varieties that will fit into that season, or learning when you need to start them in order to be successful so that you'll have a harvest. There's nothing more disappointing than getting your garden all set up, starting to grow everything, and then not getting a good harvest from it. It really is a big reason why I see so many gardeners quit too soon, is that they just give up because they're disappointed that their garden didn't do well. It's not that their garden didn't do well, it just wasn't grown in the right season or within the right time frame. So looking at all those numbers and understanding which plants grow during which season can instantly change that and up your success rate. So while there's no way to guarantee success as a new gardener, these things really do make a big difference. And then finally, don't try to go it alone. It's so hard to do this without a community. So find yourself a coach, whether it's a virtual one like what I do, where I can meet with you virtually to discuss everything, or find a mentor or just some friends who like to garden. It does make a big difference to have a support system and people to go to with these questions. And then finally, check out the video about my garden rotations. I'll link it here at the end. And what this is going to help you do is set up that good schedule from the start of growing things in the right season and also nourishing your soil on a regular basis. So this was incredibly helpful once I figured it out as a new gardener, and really was one of those aha moments where I was like, this is how I fit everything into my garden, and this is how I also take care of the soil, and it just suddenly all clicked. So that can also help you get started. If you're ready to dive into that, be sure to click over there. Otherwise, I'll see you next time, and be sure that you're finding those little successes to celebrate at any stage that you're at in your gardening journey. I'll see you guys next time. Happy planting.